At 4:38 in the afternoon, with the verdict form lying beneath Marian Ellis's hand, Tasha Green whispered, "I know him." The jury room went silent. 11 people turned toward her. Through the narrow courthouse window, rain moved across the glass in slanted lines. A clock ticked above the locked door. On the table sat coffee cups, evidence binders, half-eaten sandwiches, and the unsigned verdict that could send Peter Larkin to prison. Marian slowly lifted her pen. "What do you mean you know him?" Tasha kept her eyes on the table. The defendant, Peter, Owen Blake, leaned forward. "You said during jury selection you had never met him. I didn't think it counted. How does knowing the defendant not count?" Tasha rubbed both palms against her skirt. "He helped my family once." No one spoke. Marian looked toward the call button that would summon the bailiff. The judge had given them clear instructions. If any juror remembered a connection to the defendant, the victim, the attorneys, or the witnesses, they had to report it immediately. They had been deliberating for nearly 6 hours. 10 jurors believed Peter Larkin was guilty of leaving the scene after striking Darnell Cole with his car. Owen believed the prosecution had not proved Peter understood how badly Darnell was injured. Tasha had changed her vote twice. Marian had believed uncertainty was the reason. Now she understood there was something else inside the room. "What did Peter do for your family?" Marian asked. Tasha's voice became smaller. "He paid for my daughter's surgery." Owen pushed back from the table. "You let us sit here all day without saying that. It was years ago." "How many years?" 6. "Did he give you money personally?" "His foundation paid the hospital balance." June Harper, a retired mathematics teacher who had recorded every vote on a yellow legal pad, removed her glasses. "How much?" Tasha swallowed. "About $40,000. The clock continued ticking. Marian looked at the verdict form. 1 page. 2 possible findings. Guilty. Not guilty. Nothing on the paper explained what to do when the man on trial had once rescued a juror's child. The case itself had begun with a road. Rain. A man lying injured beside a bicycle, and a respected Christian businessman who drove away. Most Christians hear the parable of the Good Samaritan and think they understand it because they agree helping wounded people is good. But Jesus did not tell that story to people who were confused about kindness. He told it after a man tried to limit the command to love by asking, "Who is my neighbor?" The priest saw the wounded man. The Levite saw him. Both continued on their way. The Samaritan crossed the road, touched the wounds, spent his own money, changed his schedule, and accepted responsibility for what happened next. The first parable was not asking whether Peter Larkin had ever helped anyone. He clearly had. It was asking what he did when mercy interrupted the road he was already traveling. And now the same question had entered the jury room. Would they stop for the truth even if it destroyed the deliberation they had nearly completed? Marian stood and pressed the call button. Tasha grabbed her wrist. "Wait." Marian looked down at her hand. Tasha released her. "If you call the judge, they might remove me. They probably will. They could start the whole trial over. That is not our decision. My daughter would be dead without him." Owen said, "Then you should never have been on this jury." Tasha turned sharply. "You think I don't know that now? I think you knew it when they asked. I thought I could be fair. You voted not guilty. I voted guilty this morning, then changed again. Because the evidence is complicated." Owen laughed once. "No, because your hospital bill was complicated." Marian pressed the button. A light above the door turned red. Tasha stared at it. "What if the judge asks why I lied? Tell her. And if I'm charged? I don't know." "That's easy for you to say." "No," Marian replied. "It isn't." Because Marian had also hidden something. Not a relationship, a judgment. Before the first witness testified, she had recognized Peter Larkin from television advertisements for his home care company. He had spoken at charity breakfasts, church conferences, and fundraisers for injured veterans. Marian had watched him stand beside oversized checks and grieving families. She had decided he was either a very good man or a very skilled performer. By the end of the first day, she had chosen performer. She had never told the other jurors how quickly she made that decision. If this story makes you uncomfortable, begin with one honest question. Where have you confused mercy with refusing to name what happened? The bailiff opened the door. Marian said, "We need to speak with the judge." The jurors were returned to the courtroom. Peter Larkin sat beside his attorney in a dark blue suit. He looked older than he had during opening statements. His wife sat behind him with both hands clasped around a small leather Bible. Darnell Cole was not in the room. He had testified 2 days earlier from a wheelchair, his left trouser leg pinned below the knee. The judge questioned Tasha privately first, then brought the attorneys into chambers. The remaining jurors waited in the jury room without knowing what was being said. Owen paced near the window. She knew. June corrected him. She believed she could overcome it. That is a generous description of lying. Accuracy is not generosity. Felix Moran, an emergency medical technician who had said almost nothing all afternoon, opened another packet of crackers. She's gone either way. Owen stopped pacing. You don't know that. She concealed a $40,000 connection to the defendant. Maybe the judge keeps her and instructs us to disregard it. Felix looked at him. Do you hear yourself? Owen sat down. I'm saying we don't know. Marion watched him. Owen had become the defender of uncertainty. During the trial, he questioned every witness, every photograph, every second of the timeline. That was not wrong, but Owen's doubt did not seem evenly distributed. He doubted evidence against Peter. He accepted every explanation that protected him. The second parable entered the room through that imbalance. Jesus told of a Pharisee and a tax collector who went to pray. The Pharisee thanked God that he was not like other people. He listed his discipline, his fasting, and his giving. The tax collector stood at a distance and asked for mercy. Most Christians hear the parable and assume they are the humble person because they know the Pharisee is the villain. That is how self-righteousness survives Bible study. It learns the correct character to despise. The parable does not merely ask whether you boast in church. It asks whether another person's visible respectability or visible failure has already decided what you believe about their heart. Peter's charity did not prove innocence. His crime, if proven, would not prove that every charitable act had been false. Darnell's homelessness did not make him less credible. His criminal record did not make him disposable. The jury had to stop using biography as a shortcut to truth. Marion looked at Owen. Why do you believe Peter? I believe the state has not proved what he knew. That wasn't my question. Owen frowned. He testified clearly. So did Darnell. Darnell changed details. Peter changed details too, not important ones. According to whom? Owen looked away. June asked, do you know Peter? No. Have you heard him preach? He doesn't preach. He speaks at men's conferences. Owen's face tightened. I attended one event years ago. Marion felt the room shift again. You didn't mention that. I never met him. What did he speak about? Business and faith. Felix stopped eating. Did you pay to attend? My church bought the tickets. Did you admire him? Owen's voice rose. That is not disqualifying. No one said it was, Marion replied. But it may explain why every uncertainty seems to benefit him. Owen stood. You wanted him guilty before we entered this room. The accusation struck cleanly. Marion did not deny it quickly enough. June watched her. Did you? I believe the evidence was strong. That is not the same question. Marion looked at the verdict form. I disliked him before deliberations began. Owen gave a short laugh. And now you're examining my bias. Yes, that is convenient. Yes. The answer slowed him. Marion continued. I may have heard his public statements and decided that a man who speaks that much about integrity is probably hiding something. Are you saying you were wrong? I'm saying I have to separate what the evidence proves from what I wanted it to prove. No one in the room had clean sight. That was why they needed one another. The judge returned 20 minutes later. Tasha had been removed from the jury. She would be questioned further about her answers during jury selection. The alternate juror, a warehouse supervisor named Curtis Hale, would join the deliberation. The judge instructed them to begin again. Not erase their memories. Not pretend the past 6 hours had never happened. Begin the discussion again with all 12 jurors present. When Tasha entered to collect her bag, she did not look at anyone. Marion stood. Tasha. She stopped. Marion did not know what to say. I'm sorry sounded too simple. You did the right thing sounded false. She had spoken only after hours of concealment. Tasha looked toward the verdict form. "I wanted him to be the man who saved my daughter," she said. Then she left. Curtis took her chair. He had heard the entire trial, but none of the deliberation. June turned to a clean page on her pad. "We begin with the charge." Owen muttered, "We begin with contamination." The third parable was already waiting. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a field where good seed was planted, but an enemy scattered weeds among the wheat. When the servants saw the weeds, they wanted to pull them out immediately. The owner said no, because in uprooting the weeds, they might also uproot the wheat. Let both grow until the harvest, when the separation can be made rightly." Most Christians hear that story as a promise that bad people will eventually be judged. They often miss the warning against premature certainty. Human beings are quick to sort: real believer, false believer, good man, monster, victim, manipulator, safe, dangerous. We pull at what looks wrong before roots and fruit are fully visible. But the parable does not say truth never separates. It says the servants must not confuse urgency with perfect sight. The jury could not delay forever. They had a legal duty to decide, but they also could not turn suspicion into proof or charity into innocence. They had to let every piece of evidence stand long enough to be examined without ripping the case apart according to appearance. June began reading the judge's instructions. To convict, they had to find that Peter knew or reasonably should have known that the collision caused injury requiring assistance. The defense argued Peter believed he had struck an abandoned bicycle. The prosecution argued he saw Darnell on the road, stopped briefly, and left without calling emergency services until nearly 12 minutes later. Curtis asked, "What is the strongest evidence that he saw the man?" Marion opened the photograph binder. A traffic camera showed Peter's car stopped 40 feet beyond the collision. The driver's door opened. Peter stepped out. He walked back toward the bicycle. Rain and distance blurred the image. For 11 seconds, he stood near the edge of the road. Then he returned to the car. "What does he say he saw?" Curtis asked. "Twisted bicycle," June replied. "Dark clothing. Movement he thought was plastic, blowing in the rain." Felix shook his head. "People don't mistake a grown man for plastic from 10 feet away." Owen said, "At night, in heavy rain, after a collision, people mistake things." "What would you do?" Felix asked. "That isn't the legal test." "It partly is. What would a reasonable person understand?" Owen pointed at the photograph. "We cannot see what he saw." Curtis asked, "Who called emergency services?" "A delivery driver," Marion said. 9 minutes later. "And Peter?" "He called his pastor first, then his company attorney, then emergency services." Curtis looked up. "In that order?" "Yes." The room absorbed that. The fourth parable, the sower, explains why the same truth can enter several people and produce entirely different responses. The seed is the same. The soils are not. One heart is hardened by repeated traffic. Another receives quickly but has no root. Another is crowded by worry, wealth, and desire. Another receives the word and bears fruit. Most Christians hear that parable and immediately identify other people's soil. They think of the relative who never listens, the new believer who disappeared, the wealthy friend distracted by success. Jesus turns the question toward the listener. What is being pressing across your heart? What fear, loyalty, resentment, or ambition is already waiting to choke what you hear? The same phone records landed differently around the jury table. Felix heard calculation. June heard panic. Owen heard a frightened man seeking advice. Marion heard reputation being protected before a human life. Curtis heard 12 missing minutes. Evidence did not enter empty minds. It landed in histories. Felix had treated collision victims. June's husband had once fled a minor accident because he was afraid of losing his license. Owen had spent years watching his church criticized because of one pastor's financial scandal. Marion's younger brother had died waiting for an ambulance after a stranger drove past him on a rural road. He had not told the jury that. Not yet. June drew a line down the center of her pad. "Let's separate what we know from what we assume." On one side, she wrote facts. On the other, inferences. They listed the facts. Peter's car struck the bicycle. Peter stopped. Peter exited the car. Darnell was on the road. Peter remained outside for 11 seconds. He called Pastor Emmett approximately 3 minutes after the collision. He called company counsel 2 minutes later. He called emergency services nearly 12 minutes after impact. A delivery driver had already called by then. Peter told the dispatcher he may have hit road debris and possibly a person. His car had blood on the lower grille. His headlight was broken. They listed the inferences. Peter saw Darnell clearly. Peter panicked. Peter thought Darnell was dead. Peter tried to protect himself. Peter expected someone else to help. Peter genuinely believed there was only a bicycle. Curtis tapped the page. If our verdict is built mostly on the right side, it falls. The fifth parable was the wise and foolish builders. Jesus said the wise person hears his words and puts them into practice, like a house built on rock. The foolish person hears and does not act, like a house built on sand. The storm reaches both houses. What matters is the foundation beneath them. Christians often reduce the parable to build your life on Jesus, which is true but incomplete. Jesus specifically connects the rock to hearing and doing. Admiration is sand. Agreement is sand. Religious familiarity is sand if it never becomes obedience. For the jurors, the verdict also required a foundation. Not anger, not admiration, not the defendant's public image, not Darnell's suffering alone, evidence strong enough to bear the legal conclusion. Marion looked at the two columns. Do we agree he should have called immediately? Everyone did. Do we agree leaving was morally wrong? Even Owen nodded. Then our question is narrower. Has the state proved beyond reasonable doubt that he knew or should have known a person was injured? Felix said, how can a man step within feet of someone and not know? Owen replied, that is still inference. Felix hit the table with his palm. Everything human requires inference, and criminal conviction requires caution. Caution is not paralysis. No, anger isn't proof. Stop calling it anger. What do you call it? Felix stood. I call it knowing what happens when people lie in roads while good citizens make careful decisions. The room went still. He turned away. Marion asked, were you first on a scene like this? Felix looked toward the window. My first year as an EMT, woman on a service road. Hit by 3 vehicles. June covered her mouth. 3. The first driver left. The second thought she was debris. The third stopped because his bumper was dragging. No one spoke. She was alive after the first impact, Felix said. The medical examiner believed she might have survived if someone called. He sat. That's why I'm angry. Owen's voice softened. I'm sorry. I don't need sorry. I need people to stop pretending not to see. There was one strong sentence in the scene. No one tried to improve it. They returned to the evidence. At 6:15, the court brought dinner. 12 identical cardboard boxes, turkey sandwich, apple, cookies, a small bottle of water. Curtis had joined the room after the order was placed and received no box. The bailiff said he would find another meal. Curtis said, it's fine. June split her sandwich. Felix handed him the apple. Marion gave him the cookies. Owen looked around. I suppose I should offer the mustard. Curtis accepted it solemnly. This changes everything. The room laughed for the first time, not because the case had become lighter, because human beings cannot remain at maximum tension forever without becoming less human. As they ate, Owen returned to Tasha. Peter helped her child. June said, yes, does that mean nothing? No, but we're supposed to act as if it has no bearing on who he is. It has no bearing on whether he committed this offense. Owen shook his head. How do you separate the act from the man? Marion answered. The law asks us to decide the act. People aren't compartments. No, but we are not deciding whether his entire life is good. Owen looked at the verdict form. Conviction will destroy his company. Maybe hundreds of elderly patients depend on it. Curtis said, that is sentencing and consequence, not evidence. You can say that because you just arrived. I was in the courtroom. You weren't in this room. Curtis nodded. That may be useful. The sixth parable was the unforgiving servant. A servant owed a debt he could never repay. His master forgave it. Then that servant found another man who owed him far less, seized him, and demanded payment without mercy. Most Christians hear the story and conclude they should forgive because God forgave them. That is the center. But the parable also exposes how quickly received mercy can become forgotten privilege. Tasha had received generosity from Peter and felt that gratitude required protection. Owen believed Peter's good works should reduce the weight of his failure. But mercy received in one situation does not purchase exemption in another. Peter's foundation had helped families. That good did not become credit he could spend against Darnell's body. At the same time, Darnell's suffering did not entitle the jury to abandon the standard of proof. Grace does not erase justice. Justice does not cancel grace. The servant's error was not that debts never mattered. It was that mercy transformed nothing in the way he treated another person. June opened the testimony transcript from Pastor Emmett. Peter had called him 3 minutes after the collision. "What exactly did he say?" Curtis asked. June read aloud. "I think I hit something. There was a bicycle. I may have hurt someone. I don't know what to do." Pastor Emmett told him to call emergency services and return to the scene. Peter replied that he was already driving away. The pastor repeated the instruction. Peter called his attorney before calling emergency services. Felix pointed at the page. He said, "I may have hurt someone." "That proves knowledge." Owen shook his head. "It proves possibility. He knew a person might be there. Knowing there might be an injury is not necessarily knowing there was one." June reread the judge's wording. "Knew or reasonably should have known." Owen leaned back. "Then we are deciding reasonableness." "Yes," Marion said. "Not whether he was scared." "Yes." "Not whether he is admirable." "Yes." "Not whether Darnell deserved help." Marion looked at him. "Darnell did deserve help. Legally, humanly." Owen stopped. The seventh parable came from the story of two debtors. One owed much. The other owed less. Neither could repay. Both were forgiven. Jesus asked which one would love the lender more. The answer was the one forgiven more. Christians often hear that story and turn it into a celebration of dramatic testimonies. The worse your past, the greater your gratitude. But the parable also confronts respectable people who believe they have been forgiven only a little. They remain controlled, measured, and cold because they do not understand the size of the mercy they themselves need. Owen kept speaking about Peter as someone with much to lose: reputation, business, ministry influence. He spoke about Darnell mainly as the person the prosecution claimed had been abandoned. Marion wondered whether Owen saw one man as a contributor to society and the other as a cost. "What do you know about Darnell?" she asked. Owen frowned. He was the victim. Besides that, he was living at the Haven Street shelter. Before that, construction work, addiction, arrests. He served in the army. "I know. He has a daughter." "I know. Do you?" Owen's voice tightened. "What are you trying to prove? That you speak about Peter's whole life and Darnell's worst years?" Owen stood again. "I am following the evidence." "No, you are distributing humanity unevenly." Curtis looked down at his hands. June stopped writing. Owen's face reddened. "You think because I am a Christian I'm protecting the churchman. I think all of us are protecting something." "What are you protecting?" The answer had been waiting all day. "My brother." The room went quiet. Marion looked at the verdict form rather than their faces. "He was hit on a county road when he was 27. The driver said he thought he struck an animal." June whispered, "Did he survive?" "For 40 minutes. Felix closed his eyes. "A woman found him. Her phone had no signal. She drove 3 miles to call." Marion continued. "The driver came back the next morning after seeing blood on his truck." "Was he charged?" Curtis asked. "Yes." "Convicted?" "No. The jury believed he may not have understood what happened." Marion looked at Owen. "So yes. Part of me entered this room wanting a different ending." No one rushed to comfort her. She did not want comfort use to avoid the admission. "I should have told you earlier," Owen said. "Would that have disqualified you? You criticized Tasha for hiding a connection." "I know. This isn't the same." "No. But it shaped me." June placed her pen down. "Should we call the judge?" Marion considered it. "My brother's case was in another state. Different people. More than 15 years ago. I answered the jury questions honestly." "That wasn't what I asked," June said. Marianne almost smiled at hearing her own sentence returned. "We should report it." For the second time, she pressed the call button. The judge questioned Marion. The attorneys questioned her. The judge decided she could remain. Her experience did not create a legal relationship to the case, but the judge instructed her again to decide only from the evidence presented. When Marion returned, Owen said, "I thought you were trying to remove me from the jury. I was trying to understand you. You could have started with yourself." Yes, no apology could undo the earlier pressure, but the room had changed. The eighth parable was the workers in the vineyard. Some workers began early in the morning. Others were hired near the end of the day. The owner paid them the same amount. Those who worked longer complained. Most Christians hear the story as a picture of salvation arriving late in life. That is part of it, but the emotional center is resentment toward generosity. The early workers did not suffer injustice. They received what had been agreed. Their anger came because someone else received goodness without carrying the same history of labor. Owen had served in church for decades. He had watched scandals damage people who never committed them. He resented the idea that one failure could erase a man's work. Felix had spent years responding to consequences created by people who made careless choices and then asked for compassion. Marion had carried grief for 15 years and resented anyone who treated leaving the scene as one frightened mistake. Each person had worked in a different part of the day. Each believed their hours entitled them to define fairness. The parable does not teach that work is meaningless. It teaches that grace is not wages. Peter could repent after conviction. Darnell could receive mercy despite years of failure. Owen could be corrected without his service being mocked. Marion could admit bias without being discarded. Another person's mercy did not reduce anyone else's portion. At 7:30, they took another vote. 8 guilty, 4 not guilty. Progress if agreement was the only goal. Confusion if truth was. Curtis voted not guilty. Marion asked why. The prosecution proved Peter suspected a person might be involved. That supports guilt. It supports suspicion. I'm not yet convinced he could see Darnell. Felix opened the traffic photographs again. We've been over this. I haven't. Felix's jaw tightened. June said, then we go over it again. The courtroom exhibits included a digital model of the road. They dimmed the jury, room lights, and replayed the defense reconstruction. Rain, headlight glare, a bicycle lying partly in the lane. Darnell wearing dark clothes beyond it. From the driver's seat, his body was difficult to see. Then the prosecution model. Peter's car stopped. The interior light came on when he opened the door. He stepped toward the bicycle with his phone flashlight activated. The beam crossed the area where Darnell lay. Owen leaned forward. Pause. June paused it. A small bright line touched Darnell's reflective shoe. The prosecution had emphasized that moment. The defense said the animation overstated the phone beam. Curtis asked, do we have the actual phone record showing the flashlight was used? Yes, Marion said. The phone recorded flashlight activation for 22 seconds, and he was out of the car for 11. Yes. Curtis looked at Owen. What was he using the light to examine? Owen did not answer. The 9th parable was the rich man and Lazarus. A rich man dressed well and feasted every day. At his gate lay Lazarus, covered in sores and longing for scraps. The parable does not describe the rich man beating Lazarus. It describes a life in which suffering became part of the scenery. The gate was close enough for Lazarus to lie beside it. The rich man was close enough to step past him. Most Christians hear the story as a warning about wealth after death. They miss how spiritual blindness grows through repeated nearness without response. Peter Lartin ran a company caring for vulnerable elderly people. He funded clinics. He spoke publicly about compassion. Yet on one wet road, another person's suffering became something he could leave, one he called people who protected his position. The question was not whether Peter had never seen suffering. It was whether he had learned to see some people and look through others. The jury had to be careful. The parable could illuminate the moral reality. It could not replace evidence. Marion said, the phone light matters. Owen nodded slowly. It does. Does it change your vote? I don't know yet. Felix sighed. Owen looked at him. That is still allowed. Yes, Felix said. It is. That small concession mattered. At 8:15, the bailiff told them the courthouse would remain open as long as deliberations continued. They could return the next morning if necessary. June wanted to continue. Felix wanted to finish. Owen said they should sleep before deciding. Marian felt impatience rise. The 10th parable, the lost sheep, interrupted it. A shepherd has 100 sheep. One wanders. He leaves the 99 and searches until he finds the lost one. Christians love the picture of being carried home. They do not always love the arithmetic when the one person delays everyone else. The parable reveals heaven's refusal to treat individuals as acceptable losses. Owen's uncertainty was inconvenient. Tasha's disclosure had cost hours. Darnell's body had interrupted Peter's road. Peter's failure threatened employees who had done nothing wrong. Again and again, the temptation was to sacrifice one person for the comfort of the larger group. The lost sheep does not mean every decision must remain open forever. It means impatience is not permission to stop seeing the person creating the delay. Marian looked at Owen. What do you need? Time. How much? Until morning. Felix leaned back. His hesitation is not the lost sheep. No, Marian said. He is a juror doing the same job we are. June nodded. We return tomorrow. Felix looked unhappy, but he did not argue. The next morning, Marian arrived before the others. The verdict form lay where they had left it, blank, a legal decision waiting inside a human room. She placed her hand on it, but did not pick up the pen. The 11th parable was the talents. A master entrusted different amounts to 3 servants. 2 used what they were given. 1 buried his portion because he was afraid. Christians often turn the parable into a command to become impressive. Use your abilities. Build something large. Produce visible results. But the fearful servant's problem was not small achievement. It was distorted trust. He buried what was entrusted because fear ruled his response to the master. The jury had been entrusted with authority over another person's legal future. That authority was not a prize. It was not a stage for personal history. It could not be buried because deciding felt dangerous. They had to use it faithfully. Fear of convicting an innocent man could not become automatic acquittal. Fear of releasing a guilty man could not lower the burden of proof. The task was not to feel safe. The task was to be faithful with what had been placed in their hands. Owen entered carrying 2 coffees. He placed one beside Marian. I don't know how you take it. Neither do I this early. He sat. I watched the reconstruction again in my head all night. And I think he saw something. Something. But enough to require a call. Marian waited. I'm not ready to vote. Okay, you say that differently today. My church invited Peter to speak after the accident. Marian turned. When? 3 months later. Before charges. What did he say? Nothing about the case. He spoke about perseverance under attack. Marian felt anger move through her. Owen lifted one hand. I know. Why didn't you tell us? Because I didn't think attending one event mattered. Tasha didn't think. I know. They looked at each other. Did you speak to him? Marian asked. No. Did the event make you feel he was being persecuted? Yes. Do we call the judge? Owen stared at the table. Yes. The judge questioned him and allowed him to remain. Attending a public event was not a personal relationship, but the judge reminded him to disregard any information or impression not presented at trial. When Owen returned, Felix muttered, Anybody else secretly know the defendant? Curtis raised his hand. I once saw his billboard. No one laughed much. The 12th parable was the 10 virgins waiting for the bridegroom. 5 brought oil, 5 brought lamps without enough oil. When the delay lengthened and the announcement came, readiness could not be borrowed at the last moment. Most Christians hear the parable as a warning to be spiritually prepared for Christ's return. That is its great horizon, but it also exposes borrowed conviction. No one else can cultivate your hidden life for you. You cannot borrow another person's integrity when pressure arrives. You cannot borrow your pastor's certainty, your spouse's conscience, your parents' faith, or the majority's vote. Each juror had to decide. Marian could lead the discussion. She could not lend Owen a conclusion. Felix could describe emergency scenes. He could not make Curtis see the evidence through his eyes. Readiness in that room meant doing the quiet work before the final vote, reading the testimony, testing assumptions, admitting bias, remaining teachable when no one applauded. By 10, the discussion had narrowed to Peter's own recorded police interview. The detective asked why he did not call immediately. Peter answered, "I was afraid." "What were you afraid of?" "I had taken prescription sleep medication. I should not have been driving." The jurors had heard this before. June read farther. Peter said he feared arrest, loss of his business license, public disgrace, and damage to his ministry partnerships. The detective asked whether he saw Darnell. Peter answered, "I saw a shape near the bicycle." "Did you think the shape might be a person?" A long pause appeared in the transcript. Then Peter said, "Yes." The defense argued he meant only after leaving, when he began replaying the collision. The prosecution argued the wording revealed what he understood at the roadside. Curtis tapped the transcript. "Why call a pastor if you think you struck an empty bicycle?" Owen said, "Shock." "Why call an attorney?" "Fear." "Fear of what?" Owen looked down. The 13th parable was the hidden treasure. A man found treasure in a field, hid it again, and in his joy sold everything he had to purchase the field. Christians often hear the story and focus on how valuable the kingdom is, but the parable also reveals that recognizing true value reorganizes every other value. The man did not simply admire the treasure. He accepted loss because he finally knew what was worth more. Truth can demand the same. Tasha risked consequences when she finally disclosed her connection. Owen risked the identity of being Peter's defender. Marion risked reopening her brother's grief. Peter had reached the roadside and faced another kind of exchange. Stop and risk career, reputation, and exposure. Leave and preserve them, at least temporarily. Whatever he chose in those seconds revealed what he believed was most valuable. A human life should have outweighed everything he feared losing. The law did not require them to know his soul. It required them to decide what a reasonable person should have done after seeing a possible body beside a bicycle. At 11:20, they voted again. 11 guilty. Owen remained not guilty. Felix groaned. June said, "Let him speak." Owen held the paper ballot between both hands. "I believe Peter acted selfishly. No one interrupted. I believe he suspected he had injured someone." Marion asked, "Then why not guilty?" "Because suspected is not new." Curtis read the instruction again. Knew or reasonably should have known. Owen closed his eyes. "I'm afraid of deciding from moral outrage." "That is a good fear," June said. "What evidence would you need?" "I don't know." Felix whispered, "Then we're done." Marion looked at Owen. "Are you asking for more evidence or for evidence that cannot exist?" He did not answer. No one could enter Peter's mind at the roadside. No camera showed his exact view. No recording captured his thought before he called the pastor. Reasonable doubt did not mean the absence of every unanswered question. It meant doubt grounded in reason after the evidence was considered. Owen read the police interview again. "I saw a shape. Yes. I thought it could be a person. Yes. I was afraid. Yes." He placed the ballot down. "I need 5 minutes." He walked to the restroom under bailiff supervision. The room waited. 14th parable was the great banquet. A man prepared a feast and invited many guests. When everything was ready, each person produced an excuse: a field, oxen, a marriage. None of the excuses sounded evil. That is why the parable is frightening. People rarely reject God by announcing that God has no value. They are occupied, delayed, entangled in something reasonable. Peter's first call was to his pastor, then his attorney. He may have intended to call emergency services after understanding the situation. He may have told himself 1 minute would not matter, then another, then another. The invited guests in the parable did not necessarily hate the host. They valued something else at the exact moment the invitation required an answer. Most Christians hear the banquet story and think of unbelievers rejecting salvation, but every day contains smaller invitations to enter the life of God. Stop, tell the truth, forgive, confess, help, return. People miss them not because they openly despise mercy, but because something urgent appears more important. The road had invited Peter to become a neighbor. Fear gave him an excuse. Owen returned. He sat without speaking. June passed him a ballot. He wrote, folded it, placed it in the bowl. Marion counted. 12 guilty. No one celebrated. The verdict form came toward her. She filled in the defendant's name. The charge, finding. Then she stopped before signing. The 15th parable was the prodigal son. A younger son demanded his inheritance, left home, wasted everything, and returned with a speech prepared. The father ran to meet him, but the story did not end there. The older brother stood outside, angry that mercy had become a feast for someone who caused so much harm. Most Christians understand the younger brother because failure is visible. They do not always understand the older brother because resentment can look like loyalty. The father went out to both sons. One needed to come home from rebellion. The other needed to come home from self-righteousness. The parable does not tell us whether the older brother entered. Jesus left the question with the listeners. Peter Larkin might repent. He might use confession to repair his image. Darnell might forgive him. He might never want to see him again. The sentence might be severe. It might be lighter than people expected. None of that belonged on the verdict form. A criminal verdict could name guilt. It could not produce repentance. Mercy could invite a guilty man home. It could not pretend the road never happened. Justice and grace were not enemies. Grace was not acquittal without truth. Justice was not permission to hate. Marion signed. The judge read the verdict in open court. Guilty. Peter closed his eyes. His wife bent forward as if the word had struck her body. Behind the prosecution table, Darnell's sister covered her mouth. Darnell was not present. Owen looked straight ahead. Felix watched Peter. June watched the judge. Marion watched the verdict form return to the clerk's hand. One page, one legal answer, not the final judgment of a human soul. After the jury was dismissed, they entered the hallway together. No one knew whether to speak. Tasha sat alone on a bench near the elevators with her attorney. She looked at Marion. Guilty. Marion nodded. Tasha looked toward the courtroom doors. Do you think I would have voted that way? I don't know. I don't either. The elevator arrived. Tasha did not enter. Marion stayed beside her. I may be charged with lying, Tasha said. Yes. My daughter asked why I'm not home. What did you tell her? That I made a mistake. Marion waited. Tasha's eyes filled. I still love what he did for us. You can. And believe he did this. Yes. That feels disloyal. It may feel that way for a while. Tasha looked at her. You don't know me. No. Then why are you standing here? Marion glanced toward the road visible beyond the courthouse windows. Because leaving quickly has become difficult for me. Tasha almost smiled. Almost. The elevator doors closed without them. Share this video with someone who knows the parables but may need to hear the questions Jesus placed inside them. Subscribe if you want scripture that confronts real choices rather than remaining safely familiar. But do not end with a slogan. Choose one concrete response. Cross the road towards someone whose pain has become background. Examine the person you have already sorted into saint or villain. Let evidence grow before pulling at roots. Notice what fear or resentment is choking the truth in you. Build one decision on obedience rather than appearance. Release the debt you keep using to control another person. Stop resenting mercy given to someone who arrived later. See the person lying outside your gate. Refuse to sacrifice one individual for the convenience of the group. Use what God entrusted instead of burying it beneath fear. Prepare a faith that does not depend on borrowing someone else's conviction. Decide what truth is worth costing you. Answer the invitation you keep postponing. And come inside from whichever far country has claimed you rebellion or pride. Near the courthouse exit, Owen caught up with Marion. I almost stopped us. You did stop us. I mean permanently. You made us examine the case. That is generous. No, it is accurate. He put both hands into his coat pockets. Do you think we were right? Marion looked back toward the courtroom. I think the evidence met the instruction. That wasn't my question. She nodded. No, I don't feel the way I expected to feel. What did you expect? Relief. Me too. They walked outside. Rain had ended, but the pavement remained dark. Cars moved slowly along the street. At the corner, a cyclist waited for the light to change. Owen looked at Marion. What happened to your brother? He died before I reached the hospital. I'm sorry. Thank you. Did the driver ever apologize? After the trial. Did you forgive him? Marion watched the cyclist cross. Some days. Owen frowned. Is that how forgiveness works? It is how mine has worked. He considered that. I thought Christians were supposed to decide. We are. Once. Sometimes the decision has to be obeyed more than once. They reached the parking garage. Owen stopped beside a concrete pillar. Peter may go to prison. Yes, his company may close. Yes, people will say we destroyed a Christian man. Yes. Others will say we finally exposed a hypocrite. Yes. What do you think? Marion looked toward the courthouse windows. I think a man who did real good became afraid and left another man on a road. That's all. No, but it is enough for today. Owen nodded. They went in opposite directions. Marion sat in her car without starting it. The passenger seat held the notebook she had carried through the trial. She opened it and found the first sentence she had written during opening statements. A good man does not leave someone dying. She drew a line beneath it, then wrote, a person can do good and still fail terribly. A person can fail terribly and still be called to repentance. A victim does not become less important because the guilty person is complicated. The parables of Jesus had not made the verdict easy. They had removed the false choices. Mercy or truth, justice or grace, good person or bad person, faith or doubt. Jesus told stories that refused to let listeners remain comfortable inside simple categories. A Samaritan could become the neighbor. A religious man could miss God while praying. Weeds could resemble wheat. Good seed could die in crowded soil. A house could look strong until the storm. A forgiven servant could remain merciless. Early workers could hate generosity. A rich man could step past suffering every day. One sheep could interrupt the arithmetic. Fear could bury what was entrusted. An empty lamp could look ready. Treasure could reorder every value. Reasonable excuses could keep someone outside the feast. And the son who never left home could still be far from the Father. What most Christians never truly understand is that the parables were not designed mainly to help us identify other people. They were designed to prevent us from escaping the story. Marion closed the notebook. Her phone showed a missed call from her mother. She called back. How did it go? Her mother asked. We reached a verdict. Was it the right one? I believe so. You don't sound happy. It wasn't a happy case. Her mother was quiet. Then she asked, have you eaten? Marion looked to the courthouse. Yes, that means coffee. No, there was a sandwich. Court sandwiches do not count. Marion started the engine. I'll come by. Tonight? Yes. Are you sure? You must be tired. For years, Marion had answered that question by saying she would come another day. There was always another day, until there wasn't. I'm tired, she said. I'm still coming. She ended the call. At the parking garage exit, an older man stood beside a car with its hood raised. Other vehicles moved around him. Marion slowed. For 1 second, she thought of home, food, silence, the exhausting day behind her. Then she pulled into an empty space and lowered the window. Do you need help? The man looked relieved. My phone died. I think it's the battery. Marion parked. She had jumper cables in the trunk. No music rose. No revelation completed the day. No one watching from heaven needed the moment to become a perfect symbol. There was simply a person delayed beside a road, and another person deciding whether to continue past him. Marion opened the trunk. The parable was no longer something she understood. It was something she had entered.